You once dreamed that someday you'd become untouchable, immune to a cold glance, unmoved by silence that twists into misunderstanding, unshaken by a harmless sentence that somehow broke you. You still go to work. You still play the role you're expected to. You're still functioning, still strong. But on some nights, when your head hits the pillow, you feel something quietly collapsing inside. No one notices. No one asks. And maybe you're too afraid to look there yourself. You've worn the "I'm fine" mask for so long, you're no longer sure which emotions are real and which are just rehearsed responses. Carl Jung once said, "We are not what happened to us. We are what we choose to become." But how can you choose when you've never truly met the part of you that's been abandoned? You are not weak. You've just grown used to suppression. You are not numb. You simply learned to stay silent when what you needed was to be seen. And if there's one thing that could change everything, it's not learning to be tougher. It's learning to finally listen to the part of you no one ever looked at, not to fix it, but to come home to it. If you're tired of having to look okay in front of everyone, if you feel like you're slowly disappearing every time you try to be the strong one, then this may not be the video you were hoping for. But maybe it's the one you need. You believe what hurts you is what others do to you. The careless words, the doors that slam shut without warning, the departures that do not explain. But the brutal truth is this: none of that truly holds power unless there's already an open wound inside you. It is you who unknowingly gave them access to that fragile place, not through intent, but through prolonged silence, through never turning back to face the pain you buried long ago. You're not hurt by what they said. You're hurt because their words reactivated an old wound you never fully understood. The feeling of being left behind, the feeling of not being enough, the feeling that you must do more to deserve love. You've tried to appear okay. You've armored yourself with strength, but that strength was built on a hollow foundation, a false sense of stability, where pain is wrapped tightly in reason, logic, and forced kindness. You thought you had your emotions under control, but in truth, you've just been avoiding the fact that a part of you has never been healed. That's why some people walk through storms and remain calm, and you can fall apart over a passing comment. Not because you're weak, but because the outside world is pressing directly against an inside wound that's never been embraced. Carl Jung once said, "The pain we feel when confronting the outer world is merely a reflection of what remains unintegrated within. The world is not responsible for healing you. It is simply, unconsciously, pointing at the place you've continued to abandon. You are not wounded by the world. You are wounded by the part of you that was never integrated." Carl Jung called it the shadow. The parts of yourself you try to deny, suppress, or pretend don't exist. Every time you feel triggered, it's not because someone else was too cruel. It's because a part of you that was never seen just got touched. You might call it old trauma, a memory, or more simply, the version of you you've abandoned. What is not brought into consciousness returns as fate. Carl Jung. You can't control the world, but you can learn to see clearly within, the place where every reaction is born. Nietzsche once said, "He who has a why to live can bear almost any how." That why doesn't come from some grand ideal. It comes from self-understanding. When you know why you react, you're no longer ruled by reaction. When you see the darkness within, the darkness outside no longer frightens you. You thought freedom meant escaping pain. But real freedom begins the moment pain no longer holds power over you. Huxley once warned, "The modern slave needs no chains, only enough entertainment." Society will hand you everything, except the silence to look inward. Because the moment you pause, You begin to ask questions, and every real question terrifies the system. That's why you're always busy. Busy growing, busy improving, busy being a good person, but never busy enough to hear the part of you that never got to speak. Jung didn't teach you to be invincible. He taught you to be whole, not by rejecting the shadow, but by integrating it. You no longer live as half of yourself. That is the root of true strength. Not pretending to feel nothing, but no longer being controlled by what you feel. You think pain comes from what others do, the careless words, the neglect, the betrayal. But none of that could ever truly wound you unless there was already a weak spot inside you, left unhealed. You're not reacting to the present. You're reacting to old memories being reactivated. A passing comment can unravel you, not because it was cruel, but because it touched something you tried to forget. The real wound isn't in the now. It's in the places you've never dared return to. Jung called these the parts of you that haven't been integrated into consciousness. And those disowned pieces, they don't vanish. They come back as fate. You can't escape them until you turn and face them. From a young age, you learned to survive through reflexes. You became agreeable so you wouldn't be left behind. Fawn. You pulled away to protect yourself from failure. Flight. You froze to avoid feeling what was too overwhelming. Freeze. These weren't wrong. They saved you. But if you keep living by them now, in adulthood, they begin to hollow you out. You'll say, "I'm fine," while cracking inside. You'll smile to dodge discomfort. You'll disappear when what you truly need is to be seen. Your strength isn't real strength. It's a gilded defense mechanism, and you've worn it for so long. You've forgotten what it's like to live without armor. Every pain you feel today is a message from your past whispering, "There's something here that was never freed." You don't need to blame anyone. You just need the courage to stop running from yourself. Your body remembers. The pain you swallowed at 9 is still there. The belief you formed at 12, that you must be good to be loved, is still running your life at 30. That's conditioning, the invisible programming. It doesn't need your permission. It only needs your blindness. And how long have you been living this way? How long since you truly felt? How long since you dared to say, "I'm not okay"? The moment you finally see all of this, the old patterns begin to lose their grip. Not because you resist them, but because you begin to become clear. Imagine a grand stage. You're standing under the lights. The crowd is clapping, but you feel nothing. No connection, no emotion. Just a space in your chest, still and hollow. You smile, nod, take a bow. But deep down, you know, not a single person in that audience truly sees you. They see the role, the image, what you perform, not the person trembling behind the mask. You walk backstage. The lights go off. You remove the costume, but when you turn to face the mirror, you realize there's no mirror, no reflection staring back. Only a dark space where you once were, but now feel nothing. This isn't depression. This is what happens when the soul retreats after being ignored for too long. You built a version of yourself that could survive this world, but in the process, you left something real behind. Carl Jung called that part the shadow, not your enemy, just the part of you you never dared to hold and walk beside. You always smile, always stay pleasant, always stay strong. And then one day, you realize no one even remembers who you are if you stop giving. You're not loved for who you are. You're loved for the performance you maintain. And that leaves you wondering, if you stop acting, who will still be there? You live in a world where everything is labeled. Men must be strong. Women must be gentle. The successful must never break. And you, like a flawless mask, are placed on display in a play that never ends. But the soul cannot survive in the storage room of props. It needs light. It needs truth. It needs a space where it can exist without having to perform. Healing doesn't begin with action. It begins the moment you dare to sit beside the part of you that was once cast into the dark. No spotlight, no applause, just presence, without retreat. You're not in pain because of what others did to you. You're in pain because you're still giving them access to the most fragile part of you. You've lived as if kindness could shield you from being hurt. As if being patient enough, understanding enough, and non-disruptive enough would earn you a place to stay. But that was only a psychological contract you signed without anyone ever agreeing to it. And then you were disappointed, not because they betrayed you, but because you expected them to follow a rule that only you knew existed. Carl Jung said, "You don't see things as they are. You see them as you are." The world is not a mirror of justice. It's a mirror of projection. And when you haven't integrated your tender parts, you'll keep expecting others to protect them for you. But no one is responsible for the wounds you haven't healed. And the more you place that burden on their shoulders, the deeper you fall into repeating disappointment. You don't need to be accepted to exist. You don't need to be understood to be at peace. You need only one thing: to see clearly what's driving you. You are not controlled by them. You're controlled by an old belief that love must be earned through sacrifice. The truth is, no one holds the power to hurt you. Only you do, when you haven't reclaimed your sovereignty. Freedom doesn't come from being harder. Freedom comes when you no longer react the old way, when you no longer fall into the old role, when you no longer cling to unspoken expectations that no one else agreed to. You don't need to fight the world. You only need to turn inward and ask, who is driving this reaction? Is it me, or a wounded part I've never faced? And when that answer reveals itself, you don't have to try to be strong anymore. You've already become the one in charge. You don't need to become someone else. You only need to return to the part of you that was once left behind, not by changing your behavior, but by looking directly at the unconscious structure that has been running your life. You can begin with something simple. Write down every time you said yes when deep down you wanted to say no. That isn't kindness. That's an internal leak. You need to build a mental boundary, a kind of energetic field that protects your life force. Not everyone gets access. Not every emotion deserves a reaction. You need to identify the persona, the mask you wear each day. Ask yourself, am I being kind or am I performing kindness? You need to name the shadow, the anger, the selfishness, the softness you once denied. Not to let it take over, but to stop banishing it again. When you can hold both the light and the darkness in the same frame, you are no longer split between extremes. You become whole. You don't need to respond to everything. Practice intentional silence. Don't reply immediately. Don't explain. Don't defend. Silence is where your inner power is restored. You can choose to disappear, consciously, not to escape, but to clarify one thing. My worth does not depend on always being available. Say no without needing a reason. Hold your inner truth, even if no one validates it. That's the first step toward freedom. Try this. Each day, write about a moment when you felt disconnected from yourself. Then ask, who was speaking for me then? Was it truly me or the child I once abandoned? Every time you're honest with yourself, you stitch back a fracture in your being. Jung said, healing doesn't come from becoming better. It comes from becoming whole. You don't need the spotlight. You don't need applause. You just need enough stillness to hear the deepest part of you calling your name. And in that moment, you'll realize no one can hurt you anymore because you no longer betray yourself. You've spent years learning how to live without letting anyone down. But what about you? Are you willing to stay with the fragile part of yourself without trying to fix it right away? Are you ready to face the emptiness that's followed you for so long, instead of numbing it with busyness? This isn't an invitation to change. It's an invitation to sit still, not to toughen up, not to do more to prove your worth, just to be still and listen closely to the voices inside you that have never been heard. You may not be able to solve all your pain right now, but you can stop running from it. Only when you face it can you begin to live without being controlled by what's outside you. Not everyone is ready for this, but if you're still reading this, maybe you're more ready than you think. You once believed you'd be safe if you became numb. You once thought you'd be respected if you never showed weakness. But then, you discovered the truth. No wall can protect you from yourself. Carl Jung once said, "We do not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." You don't need to hurt others to defend yourself. You only need to stop betraying the truest part of you. Pain is not failure. It's a mirror reflecting the places within you that are still unclear. It only hurts when you keep pretending nothing happened. You don't need to understand why people mistreated you. You only need to understand why you stayed where you were never truly seen. Healing doesn't come from forgiving others. It comes from no longer abandoning yourself. Freedom isn't about being loved the way you want. It's about holding your truth, even when it costs you someone's approval. You'll lose a few roles. You'll lose some relationships held together by one-sided effort. But in return, you reclaim your whole self, no longer split in pieces. No one can manipulate you anymore. No words can undo you. No situation can control your behavior, because you have nothing left to hide. You don't have to be perfect. You just need to be honest enough to stand still with yourself. And in that moment, you'll stop asking, "How do I stop getting hurt?" Instead, you'll quietly know, "No one can hurt me anymore, because I've stopped abandoning who I am." If you've made it to the very end of this video, maybe you're no longer searching for a simple answer. Maybe you're searching for something deeper, a return. A return to the self that was once forgotten. A return to the voice that was pushed out of the conversation. A return to who you are, without needing to earn a place in anyone's life. You don't need to know exactly where you're going. You only need to know this: you're no longer running from yourself. Every small action from this moment forward can be a declaration. I choose clarity over being liked. I choose freedom over temporary approval. I choose sovereignty over playing the good person. And if you've ever said yes while your soul was silently screaming no, write that down, right now. Because only when the truth is named can you step out of the old loop, the one where you used to disappear. Drop a comment below. I choose sovereignty, or just one word: I'm home. This path isn't for everyone, but if you're still here, maybe it's for you. And if you're ready to take one step further, watch the next video, where we explore Carl Jung's view on the relationships that drain you, and why sometimes love is the very thing that breaks you.